Hi there, Doug.
Hi there. How are you doing?
I am currently sitting off of
Morning.
Sunset Boulevard where the sinkhole happened over the weekend. Did you hear about that?
I did.
It's really causing a lot of disruption.
Yeah, it's amazing how much damage water can do.
What are you and the Burdge Architects team up to lately?
Well, I'm in office in Malibu for over 30 years. You're used to our fair share of natural disasters, caused by floods or high tides, or in the case of wildfires, it seems like every 7 to 10 years is a major wildfire. We've been kind of prepared for that. It's not something that you think you go to architecture school for, is to do fire rebuilt architecture, but it's something if you're going to live in a town like Malibu, and our firm is the biggest firm here, and we kind of have obligation to be ready to work with clients when these things happen and work with local jurisdictions as a group of architects to kind of help them create better codes. So when a fire does happen, then we're better prepared and we don't have as much loss. Um, One of the bigger things that our firm is super focused on now, really making sure that when it does happen again, there will be a next fire, that as many structures are taken down, and having an understanding of these last fires and learning from them and learning how they spread. And then when they hit a particular structure, what we can do as architects to kind of that. And you can only do so much, of course, but you can just figure out, can we do any better than was before?
Yeah, on leading the charge, and that's a very honorable thing to do. And I hope that your efforts make a wonderful impact on the region.
Hope
Can
so.
you, I'm sure it will. What specific actions are you taking to put in place the right codes, make the right changes?
Well, it's interesting when you talk about codes. A lot of states, and then particularly cities and counties, obviously they might have a set of building codes. There's universal building codes, nationwide building codes. It's called a universal building code, the UBC. And then you have particular jurisdictions. In the case of Malibu or Pacific Palisades, that's run by the city of Los Angeles. Malibu, it's its own city, so they have their own codes. Um, Unfortunately, it takes, in some cases, a natural disaster or a human disaster or some sort of disaster to not change a code. It was back in 1933 that it took a Long Beach earthquake to unfortunately make a better earthquake code. So, even react by maybe having code cycles, and code cycles only change a few years. What our office has done, we can't wait for a jurisdiction to tell us what to do. We as any architect knows this, and good builder, they know what it would take to build a better structure. So the structures that were lost, for instance, they allow crawl spaces and vents into crawl spaces and attics, and the embers got into these houses, not necessarily burning from the outside, but burning from the inside. And so we need to do a much better job. That was 80% of it, is the ember control. So we can't wait for the codes to change. So we just insist to do that now, and doing ember resistant screens. Even though you're not required to, you need to do it because it will become a law. And so we all know that. So you just have to have our own little way, our own little standards. So in our cases, if you go with our company, we have a Burdge Standard of fire rebuilding.
Can you tell me more about that Burdge Standard?
Well, it's a combination of, you understand, like, as an you design a house for a client or a building, commercial, build a lot of commercial buildings also. So we can control what's actually on the structure. And so, like said earlier, there's the ember control, obviously the type of roofing, understanding the science of a fire ember is actually coming from another location, maybe coming from miles away. And so you can't necessarily know where it's coming from. It could be coming from any direction. So it's when it gets to your property, and then we'll start with your property. So you need to work on, keeping landscaping away from your structure. You have control over a neighbor's fence, so you need to try to control that and make sure that's not combustible. If there's sheds that are close by, that might not even be yours. It may be a neighbor's shed. You need to try to get those removed. So anything that could be burning, is we call it kindling, like you're making a campfire, you have kindling that could cause that to ignite your structure. Trellis that's against the house, you got to change that out to non-combustible material like steel. So the deckings, the members come to the deckings, the old wood decks that are built. So all those things attribute to getting your house. So those things are just outside your house. You need to remove those or make them more fire retardant. And then there's a rule called the 5 foot zero setback rule, where you really need to keep any kind of wood chips and anything away from your structure. It has to be more like a gravel surround around it. So just think of any fire around something. So the something your house. So you need to remove all those potential burning objects, potentially burning the kindling, as I call it. Once you get into the house itself, then yes, there's a lot of things you can do. The vent screens, the type of roofing, maybe minimize overhangs so then you don't have embers building up over an overhang. The material side of the house. And even when we use wood siding, it itself, at least in Malibu, it's a resistant assembly. So it's the wall assembly. The quality of windows, so the embers can't get in the windows. So all these things kind of add up to it doesn't change necessarily the aesthetic. It looks like, oh, that's a beautiful house from the outside, but at least it has these things. And then we could a little bit later on how these things hopefully equate into a reduction or a help in your insurance when you apply for your fire insurance.
So the materials can help your insurance application.
Well, if you think about it, if you're a good driver, you get a good driver discount if you haven't gotten any tickets, or if you try to keep yourself, off and you get a discount on your car insurance. So to get a discount on your auto insurance, it's about risk. And, I don't blame them. I mean, they're an area where the power still exists in neighborhoods, and maybe there's bad water pressure that's coming to your house. So the location of your house it's a high fire risk. You hopefully try to get that minimized, and that's working with your jurisdictions, your neighborhoods, and they're finally figuring that out. But when it comes to your actual structure, yeah, you have to do these things. This that people hear about that not are just inside of your house, because that's an inside the house fire, but a wildfire detention system of the sprinklers that are wetting down your structure before the embers get there. They are insurance companies, and at least in the state of California, we have a new insurance commissioner, and they're finally talking. They're realizing this is not just a one-off. Oh, we'll have like a fire, and then maybe we'll never have a fire again. It's a fire every year in some neighborhood. And so they know they have to offer the insurance because people have mortgages and they need to have the mortgage has to be insured. But people want to, if they're going to rebuild their house, they need to know that when the next fire happens, they have some sort of assurance. So if they do these things, fortunately, some carriers are realizing they have to provide that at least be able to give them any kind of policy at all. So it's finally starting to come out in the industry.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And that's awesome that with the help of the new commissioner and other things, that things are going in the right direction for people to be able to get those good coverages. Are there specific products or materials that you feel like the general public is not aware of that could be beneficial to this region?
Well, I'm getting you, and well, you say this region. It's interesting now, and there's year. This is 2026, and we're talking in July right now. We wildfires in Utah. We hear about wildfires in Arizona, and we hear about in Oklahoma. So it's not just this region of California. It's the world too, right? There's wildfires in Australia. There's wildfires, around and there's wildfires in Europe right now. So it's just understanding that you're building a structure. So, we've all Europe, and most of the structures there are made out of stone and they last for centuries, whether it be, over or in the case of fire, they last. So, we learn from other areas that these things go on for centuries. There's that our structures are burning down and over a 20-year lifespan. There are systems set up that everyone is kind of learning is the new normal. So if you want to live in an area where your house is still standing after a natural or a disaster, however the disaster happened, could have been a lightning strike, could have been a down power line. in the case of wildfires, how to take care of these neighborhoods and allow people to still live in nature or next to nature.
Yeah, that's a good point because you don't want to cut down all the trees and that could be kindling, as you call it. Um, but that's one of the beautiful parts of living on the coast in this area. And you want to keep the area protected if a fire does start.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about trees, I mean, when wildfire in 2018, you palm trees is the big, whether you're Florida, Hawaii, California, palm trees are everywhere. Palm trees are pretty tough because they're like torches, and the palm fronds that are the older ones, most people don't trim their palm trees, and the dry fronds that are on there, they're the ones that are catch fire and they're flying around the neighborhoods. They land on someone else's house. And remember, these fires are happening when everyone's been evacuated. Most of the population's actually out. There are a few people that stay behind, and those are the ones that end up saving houses. But it's all these things that are happening when no one's really at your house. And so there is that palm frond that just flew in from some neighborhood and drops into your next to your house and then causes your house to burn down. And then other types of trees like eucalyptus trees is very heavy oil. They were in, and there's a lot of eucalyptus in Malibu, and they're out surely cutting those down. There's only a few protected trees in Malibu, which are actually beautiful trees. There's sycamore trees, oak trees, but if you pine trees, which have sap, and eucalyptus, and unfortunately. We're not able to put new palm trees in our neighborhoods for that reason. Is that the fronds, because most of them are not maintained. They're too, and they end up burning other people's places down.
I just can't help but wonder is what Malibu is going to be like now.
Well, Malibu's an interesting town. And if you go back in the day, in the 20s and the 30s when it was formed, I mean, May Ridge family, when there was not even the Pacific Coast Highway was up through it. Actually, the founding of Malibu was ranchos and family. They actually put a rail. It was just a small family rail line, and they actually put it right in Malibu. And they stopped then the major railing company when Southern Pacific Rail was going through. So that's why the train tracks don't go through Malibu, even though they go through Santa Barbara and these other beach towns. So that's an interesting little fact. But Malibu in a place back in the day, even in the 20s and 30s, where it's just people had second homes, and the colony, which is the colony today, that's an area where people had second homes, and then it became a first home neighborhood, and that's where I raised my family. My kids lived there for 30 years and went to all the schools, and it still is a thriving community. Locals, if you think of Malibu, it's a surf spot. It's great for tourism. It's beautiful. It's just a hamlet, just Los Angeles, and it's kind of a getaway just driving up Pacific Coast Highway. And so the future is good as wanting to make it. I mean, you hear because of the cost of rebuilding, is this going to be just only for the very wealthy? And they just want money on new schools. So the town itself is enriched, and they want to be able to maintain the locals. It's just hard every time there's a fire. It kind of pushes the locals out because these families don't have the great insurance, and they really had more some that no insurance, and then they just have to sell and move out. So unfortunately, every time there's a fire, there's a lot of loss of locals. But we're encouraged working every day and getting clients every week, and their families actually moving to Malibu from other states. We have a family working with who just moved from Texas, and they want to live near the beach. And so the draw is still nature. You're hiking, you're in nature, you're in the mountains and the beach and the beautiful weather. That's incredible every day of the year. It's amazing, or most days out of the year. And so they're still there to live in Malibu. And so the rebuilding has to be a team effort that between the city and the builders, everyone else, and the great schools. It's still a place to live.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And I totally agree with that. I spent the weekend up there. My family came down and we took them up to Malibu. It was one of the full days that we had. It was a great memory. Doug, before we got the podcast, thank you for sharing all of your insights. And I'm excited to see how the area develops. Who you want to partner with for success in this Malibu rebuilding effort?
Well, I mean, you have to with your local jurisdictions. I mean, city is like who you want to partner with. They're more of like that's the bad guy. Oh, you got to get a permit from them. They're against your project. But in the case of Malibu, it really is because between the city council and the planning commissioners, they're the market. You see them in the schools. Their kids go to the same schools you do, so they're all locals. And so, you need to feel like, okay, this is a effort. They're it's a good thing. Create a sewer line, in the homes area, because right now those 300 homes are being rebuilt on the beach, and they have individual septic systems that have propensity to leak into the ocean, and so that's not good. So we need to be smarter. And even though mounted as a city in 1993 by not allowing LA City to bring a sewer line up PCH, they're kind of going back now and realizing that the houses on PCH on the ocean really should have a dedicated sewer line, and the waste is kept off the ocean, or potential to keep out of the ocean. So we're making some pretty big picture strides here that you would never think would be possible. 20 years ago, people are realizing fires are going to happen again, unfortunately. But just one of the things when you live in a certain town, it's just the way it is. There's other cities and people don't move; they just adjust and they make it work. So you really have to work with closely, in which we are. It's a small town feeling, and you're working with local jurisdictions, and everyone's in the same place here. We all want to rebuild, and the builders are important, and try to figure out a way to keep costs down. Are we doing out of prefab now and working with local people? So how do we get the construction costs down? So, we work with a lot of builders, and including a lot of prefab folks that can help create a better home that's not as expensive, but can still last long and be ready for the next, disaster possibly.
Interesting thought about looking at other countries, perhaps like European countries, and how they have lasting structures. That's an interesting topic.
Well, what we do is that we're fortunate. We have one of our top architects is from Australia. When the last fire happened, or the last couple fires happened, we got together. She hooked me up with a group down in Australia. They just had a group. They're called bushfires down there, and it's similar, right? It's just a fire that's the brush comes in and the embers happen, and it takes down neighborhoods. And then what are they doing? And they're when we talk to other towns and architects working like in the Bay Area up in Napa, the Tubbs fire was up there 2000, I think 16 or 17, and they've actually designed the whole neighborhood so they have the proper water supply. They're not on their utilities. They're down their power lines. So there are things they should do. People come to Europe and they go, "Why do you guys still have power lines up?" That's like pretty crazy. That's the cause of fires. That was the cause of the Eaton fire that took down 3,000 homes in Pasadena area. It's the cause of the the amount of these utility companies, they should be doing the power lines. And you thought it'd be just like, okay, the amount of money paying a lawsuit, you could have downed all the power lines in Los Angeles. So, and it's beautiful too. So they are finally downing the power lines along PCH. We're taking neighborhood by neighborhood, and they're going to be downing their power lines. So again, why does it take a natural disaster, or a disaster in the case of a fire? In this case, Palisades was man-made craziness. Um, but still, we'd be smarter when we're developing these communities. So again, worldwide is doing it. We need to learn from everybody, because it's not like we're not going to have another fire.
I hear you, and I commend everything that you're doing. If someone wanted to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way to do so?
Well, you can go directly to our website, buaia.com. You can call the office. We're in Malibu. Um, we have like 20 of us working, we have 4 architects, and yeah, look forward to sharing the word. We're working with a lot of developers now. And that one thing, it's kind of an interesting takeaway. About 10 years ago, I worked with the real estate brokers, and I tell them, a big thing then, oh, how energy savings is your house? And we did really great water heaters, or where we have good sprinkler systems. And I tell the brokers now, I says, well, if you want to live in Malibu, you have to have, and you tell your clients this, you have to have how fire safe your house. So with the real estate brokers now, they're understanding, and the developers that are building the new homes, they're now able to sell their homes saying, hey, we're more fire safe than, let's say, this other home. So that is kind of like the money on, and they're putting the sprinkler systems on the roof. We're working with developers now. So when they do go to market, they're going to say they're fire safe, fireproof, or more like, can you be safe, or can you be a better structure? And so it can also be energy efficient, which is great. But now it's kind of like, it has to be, you're going to have a new structure in these neighborhoods. How fire resistant is this house versus, let's say, another developer that doesn't even do those things? So that's the new thing. So I think that's great. And it's just here to stay. And the realtors understand that and the developers understand that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doug, for everything that you shared today. Really looking forward to this with everyone and appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful day.